Harry Littman, here's my question for you. With all of the machinery that the Federalist Society has built, eroding the rights of the federal government in favor of the states, breaking down the administrative state, and having the Chevron doctrine overturned, providing that federal courts give little deference or no deference potentially to agency action, whereas agencies used to have this doctrine that said if an agency does it, you're supposed to give deference to it. Federal judges, Republicans, and the Federalists hated that. They thought it was a way that Democrats were using the government to overreach and overregulate things. But I could give you other examples as well, Harry, but ultimately, did the Federalists inadvertently and the Trump kind of legal leaders, if you want to call them that, build an infrastructure that can now be co-opted by the opposition in ways that undermine Donald Trump's agenda? One of the things that Donald Trump, and you see with this cabinet pick, that they're looking to do, I think, is have this government that is encroaching on people's rights in the way that Donald Trump views it. Bloody mass deportations. We heard Tom Homan talk about he's going to go after, mayors and governors and all of these things. There's been a lot of Supreme Court rulings that have now limited the power of the federal government, limited the power of agencies. So if RFK Jr., for example, give an example, wants to do a crazy RFK Jr. vaccine ban, in the past, there was this Supreme Court doctrine created in the 80s, the Chevron, which was taught for like 40 years in law school, which says, look, an agency did it. Let's give them a presumption that it's not arbitrary and capricious, give it deference, and we, the federal courts, really can't challenge it. But now the Chevron doctrine being overturned, you would, if you're want to challenge something like that, the same way you and I would talk about these Trump judges doing nationwide injunctions or whatever, right? Isn't the strategy, if you're challenging these things, is you go to a federal judge who seems sympathetic, you file the lawsuit there, you ask a federal judge to issue nationwide injunctions, ultimately blocking, what these Trump initiatives are. So now, granted, it will eventually work its way up to the Supreme Court, but whether or not the Supreme Court takes it in a shadow docket or not is another question. But Harry, maybe speak to that, which is, how has this machinery that's been created, now Trump's going to want to use the opposite, and there's a lot of traps they've set for themselves.
It's a super interesting point. Brilliant, I would say, Ben. Seriously. When you look at what everyone agrees has been a phenomenally successful 40, 50-year program by conservatives to change the courts, put their people in, change the law, there's a pivot point that was hit maybe only 2017 or so with the definitive shift of the Trump justices. They were, and you'll hear certain conservatives talk about this kind of quietly. It was their program back in 1980 was a minority program. It was to empower standing, and that kind of keeps cases from coming in. And these federalism doctrines, again, dismiss cases. It gave real sort of possibility for a minority as they were culturally and politically in the federal courts to really beat back certain, as they saw it, kind of liberal cases. Now they're on top. And some of the very same doctrines are not so congenial to them, and even worse, give ammunition to, well, not in the Supreme Court, because there's only those poor three, justices who they can ignore if they want. But around the country, same thing for litigants. The very ability to say, you can't do this, you can't do that, which is what the first generation of Federalists wanted to say, is now changing. Chevron is maybe the best example of this. Chevron was a ploy at the time in the mid 80s when Republicans were sometimes getting the executive branch, not so much the legislative branch, and so it empowered the executive branch potentially, or if that's what it would be. Now, of course, now that it's gone, the tool that Donald Trump would want to use has also been taken away. Now, what's replaced it, of course, is a whole nother conversation, but this sort of major questions doctrine, there's more than enough play in the joints for a court to enable Trump to do the things he wants. But your basic idea that they created these doctrines defensively against what they saw as a tyrannical majority, and now we've met the enemy and they are us, they are more and more the deep state. That's a little bit awkward, and also just an important part of kind of legal culture and a sign of their success.
Harry, you raised such a good point there, because it shows how phony some of these legal doctrines are and these frameworks are that are created by Republicans. Great point. The Chevron doctrine itself of giving deference to agencies was because Reagan wanted to deregulate things, and he didn't want the agencies to be questioned. So they create a Chevron doctrine that says you can question it when Reagan's doing all these deregulations. When they were being challenged, you have to give it deference. Then it was used a different way by, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama, and President Biden, who said, look, we need common sense regulations here. We get deference. So then the Republicans are like, whoa. We know we created this doctrine of deference. Stop. No deference. It should be the federal judges, because now what we want to do is go and pick a federal judge who we appoint in the Northern District of Texas to issue a nationwide injunction, and we control the Supreme Court now as well. So let's get our nationwide injunction. Let's bring it to the Supreme Court, and we can stop regulatory policies that maybe protect the environment or empower the Securities and Exchange Commission to stop fraud. We can block all of student loan debt forgiveness. We can stop all of that with the Supreme Court nationwide injunctions. And so then they flip their whole doctrine now. And so now the status of it is no deference when they want the deference. I wonder, Harry, are they going to go, whoa, it is deference. Let's go back now to Chevron once again. They may. Harry, I think the quagmire they're in is they may be like, look, we want to get rid of nationwide injunctions now because Democrats are going to try to get these nationwide injunctions. Can we get the Supreme Court to stop nationwide injunctions? But then that again can backfire on them when they want the nationwide injunctions, when they're not in power. So I don't, Harry, it's just.
I just got to chime in on a few other. This is really, there's a book here, but I clerked in the DC Circuit, which gets all these administrative law cases at the high water mark of Chevron, and it was definitely the hobby horse of the right-wing judges. There was a big article about how important Chevron was that went around to everyone, written by none other than Circuit Judge Starr, the later independent prosecutor. So it was a article of faith, and just for the reasons you say, because Reagan had put in different folks in the executive agencies, and they thought, this is the little bit we've captured. Here's another even better example. If you're not succeeding at the federal level, and right now I think Dems are going to be thinking in these terms, what do you think about state power? And there were really a series of controversial decisions in the 90s about basically the 11th Amendment and the 10th Amendment and state power and how the feds can interfere. And it permitted enclaves of not just Republican, but conservative Republican thought to, at least within their jurisdictions, do things and not be able to be messed with by Congress, which is the big enemy, right? The most dangerous branch to them. And here you have it. But now, 2024, not too many tools are left for the Dems. What a big one! We're going to do a podcast on this just next week. Are the state power, can AGs step in and in immigration, but other ways as well, to try to not just resist, but literally push back and have their own sovereign approaches. We're seeing this in abortion, I mean, in everything. So now it's like, now state power is one of the real focuses of the Dems, and Trump will try to crush it if he can. But there are these doctrines out there from the Supreme Court that limit the federal government's power to really steamroll them.
Harry Littman, it's just interesting. You teach law, I teach law, we teach at different schools, but like when I was a student at law school, you learn this doctrine as though it's the answer to the test. But in fact, it is go from student to, we're a little bit different. You clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. People need to look into Harry's background. He's clerking for 1 Supreme Court justice, and you clerked at a circuit court, and DC Circuit is among the most impressive things that simply exist in the legal field. But as you go from that to, like a legal professor, you learn that actually these teachings are real just constructs of power, and how those in power have manipulated it ultimately to suit the ends that they want. And there's a constant manipulation of it that is packaged as lofty legal doctrine that's going to be here forever. But, it really is subject to coarse political fistfighting.
By some.
And I think that's the positive note that we'll leave it on, is the hope has always been that that's not the way it is, and that precedent matters, that we respect it, and the difference now, the assault on precedent that we've seen, and that's really,
I believe in right answers, but I think the Supreme Court, they're as the famous motto says, they are not final because they're infallible. They're infallible because they're final.
Leave it at that note. Everybody subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel, the Talking Feds podcast, the Talking Feds Substack. Make sure you subscribe to all and leave a note in the comments that you did. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben.
Real quick, Meta just changed their algorithm.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.